Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, and welcome to a quick review of the Outriders demo. So we'll just go over a few things with the demo, how it plays, what I think of it, that kind of stuff, whether there's any promise for it. So first of all, what is Outriders? Well, Outriders is a game where you play as the Outrider. It's kind of weird actually, because your role is effectively that of a Pathfinder, not an Outrider. An Outrider is someone who herds cattle, I believe, or something like that. Which I don't think is what they kind of meant. So you're more like a Pathfinder. You're basically finding a path for humanity, being the first to go somewhere, exploring, seeing if it's safe, that kind of stuff. So I guess they couldn't call it Pathfinder because, was it Andromeda? Mass Effect Andromeda. Basically your character was called Pathfinder in that. So I guess they kind of realised that if they use that story, people might think it's some kind of Mass Effect spin-off or something like that, which obviously wouldn't go down well with EA. So Outriders, I guess, is a title we're stuck with. Anyway, you play as the Outrider. You basically go around finding stuff, as I said. The initial game starts off with you effectively encountering one of the storms on your new planet Enoch after arriving from Earth. The storm alters you, changes you into something else, but it also causes you to get injured. Excuse me. So you basically end up in cryo for 30 odd years. When you wake up, the last of humanity is doing what it does best, fighting among themselves, trying to kill each other off, and one side trying to wipe out the other because they believe that's the only way they can survive. So how it got to that stage, who knows, but rather ridiculous if you think about it. Anyway, you come back, you try and work out what's going on, you join one of the sides, and that's kind of where the demo ends. You're basically being sent out to see if you can kind of rescue mankind, and then the demo's kind of over. But aside from that, as for the core loop of the demo, the core loop basically shows effectively what you're going to be doing when you play the main game. And this is literally a slice of the main game, so it's not a beta, it's not an alpha, it's not something that's a work in progress. This is effectively what you're going to be getting, and it's the entire first kind of small area. The main game apparently has a 30 odd hour campaign. I can see it lasting a lot longer if you hunt for loot, and you play this as it's supposed to be played, which is as a looter shooter. And that brings us nicely on to the actual gameplay loop. This is kind of hit or miss, to be honest. Hit if you manage to pick one of the two classes which actually complement the gameplay style that's been built into the game, and miss if you pick the other two. It literally is that straightforward. If you pick a Pyromancer or a Technomancer, you're going to struggle, certainly in the early stages and in the demo side that I've played. The Technomancer struggles slightly less than the Pyromancer in that you can hide behind cover and throw out turrets. The only problem is that when you're in cover, if enemies focus on you for even a second, they'll just lob a grenade at that cover, forcing you out of cover again, basically. And once you're out of cover as a Technomancer, you are literally the squishiest thing on the planet, so you will just get blasted without really having any direct way of retaliating. So it kind of makes it a bit kind of weird to play that class at the beginning, because you literally don't really have much defense. When you level up to about level 3, you've got one power which kind of helps protect you a little bit out in the open, but even then you won't survive very long out in the open at all. You have to rely on your turrets tanking aggro for you, basically, because that's the only way you can actually be out there, not have to duck into cover, is to basically have them focus on your turrets and your other skills while you kind of pick them off while they're still trying to focus. So with the Pyromancer, it's kind of even worse, because you don't have any way of actually stopping the enemy once you're out of cover. So you can burn them, or you can try and turn them into bombs, but none of this stops them actually trying to attack you still. So you're effectively kind of out in the open. You've got one power which just takes way too long to recharge, which allows you to grab some health from a enemy. But the problem is the way they burn down your health, you're never going to grab enough to be able to stay alive. So the Pyromancer is undoubtedly the hardest class to play, and if you pick that first, which is what I did, you really will start to struggle to find any enjoyment in the gameplay. If you're world tier 2 and the game automatically sticks you onto world tier 3, you literally will come around the corner and die almost instantly to a hail of bullets. Not because you don't know what you're doing, but because your character is just that squishy as a pyromancer. So it's kind of silly. In the end, I had to switch off automatic world movement simply because I had to like grind level 2 or world tier 2 before I had enough gear to even attempt world tier 3, and that was just as my pyromancer. As a technomancer, it wasn't so bad. I still had trouble surviving in a tier just above the one I was in, simply because I didn't have enough high level gear, but it was certainly not as bad as when I played the pyromancer. And then that contrasts with playing as I think it's called the trickster. Yeah, it's a trickster. Basically the trickster is ridiculously well geared for close combat. So if you slice the enemies with your it's kind of like an astral blade, it literally effectively evaporates their outer skeleton, so you can see where their weak spots are, but it means they can't attack while they're in that state. If you punch them, again the same thing happens, so they can't attack while they're in that state. If you fire up a big globe, it slows time around you, including bullets, and then you can just attack at your leisure from that until it runs out. So you're basically, as the trickster, totally geared towards just rushing into someone's face and basically taking them out in a matter of seconds. So once you start playing as that class, it's actually quite good fun to like play the mechanic where you can't stay in cover and you have to rush people and you have to do this, that and the other. You can even teleport behind people. That's one of the first powers you get, basically. So that class turned out to be completely geared towards how this game plays, and once you start playing that class, it's really good fun. But then that begs the question, why are the other classes so hard to play, given that you're forced to actually rush enemies all the time? You literally cannot stay still and you cannot stay in cover. So it's an odd choice to give all of the other sort of classes, aside from the Geomancer, which I'll come to in a second, no ability basically to actually face tank something, while making that the sole mechanic of combat within the game. So that's kind of puzzling. The Geomancer, who is basically the rock-based one where you can hurl bits of earth at people, you can turn yourself into a boulder, float up in the sky and then slam down on people, and you can also make rock skin. So all of those, as you can possibly see just from the descriptions, make it sort of like easy for you to rush someone, because you've got stone skin, their bullets are just bouncing off you until that runs out. So you can literally run up in their face and then smash them with rocks or whatever. And just like the trickster, you kind of basically you have a defense when you're close up. So in terms of the gameplay loop, it's a bit puzzling because although it's quite good fun, only 2 of the classes seem actually viable for the mechanic. So unless they kind of swap around which skills the other 2 classes like Pyromancer and Technomancer get first, it's a bit puzzling as to why they've designed it this way, because they must have play tested it and known that rushing up into someone's face as a Pyromancer is just a suicide pact, and the same with the Geomancer. So I'm just a bit puzzled by that. But anyway, that aside, let's go on to the looting side, and this is where the game really shines. I mean, it has some of the best loot I've seen in a game in a while. Best guns, the exotics are all fun to look at. Not that you can get them, I've had to look at some other people's views. I got one legendary, which that's the name for their exotics. I got one legendary, which was basically a freezing sniper, and annoyingly, the sniper is the one weapon in the game that I don't like using, because it zooms in, and when it's an in-your-face kind of game, if you're 2 feet from someone and you're trying to zoom with a sniper, obviously that's nonsense. So having snipers kind of tends to be, unless the enemy absolutely can't see you and you've somehow managed to get a drop on them, which in this game looks like it's going to be like ridiculously rare, snipers are just pointless basically. So me dropping the sniper as my first exotic is kind of like a testament to my luck. I get the same kind of luck in Destiny, where I've done the Deep Scrolling Crypt raid, which is the latest raid in that game in case you haven't played it, and there's a sort of exotic at the end called the Eyes of Tomorrow. Bungie have lied blatantly about there being some kind of like mechanic where you get more chances the more you've played it, because I've played for 30 times and literally not seen it drop once. So it's clearly not, there's no kind of protection in place there at all. Someone's just said there is to keep people quiet or something, which I think will come back and bite them in the arse soon. But yeah, have that aside, basically getting exotics in this game is kind of like Destiny in that it's really rare, but that actually they do have a mechanic which clearly states per world tier you get a percentage going up. The only downside of that is they don't tell you what your start percentage is. So they say, oh, you've now got 125% more chance of getting something, or you've now got 150% more chance, and you're thinking, of what? Because if the original chance was like 2%, 150% more of that is like 5% kind of thing, you know, so it doesn't really help. But that aside, the actual weapons themselves, the traits they have, the frequency with which you get those traits, and the fact that the traits start appearing on just uncommon gear. So common gear, bit crap, doesn't have any traits, but at least it will shoot stuff. Uncommon gear starts giving you traits which complement like your powers, and you can see just from the uncommon gear alone how many build possibilities there are. So it looks like this game is going to be quite good for builds. If you love doing builds, like if you're in Diablo 3, I mean, once you started getting the actual end game loot, the builds that you could make with that completely changed your class. Your barbarian was suddenly like you know, a wizard kind of thing. It's this kind of build diversity that you can clearly see is going to be possible within Outriders, and that makes the loot system fantastic. It's certainly just from the demo alone shaping up to be a far better loot system than something like Destiny, which is quite a shame given Destiny's been around for like 6 years and still can't seem to get the loot right. It's so, I mean, to be fair, some of the problem with Destiny is that those people running it tend to kind of have a weird idea where they'll just keep shifting meta each season, which makes no sense anyway, because, you know, the game isn't based on metas. But every year they'll kind of go, oh, now the meta's going to be pulse rifles, oh, now the meta's going to be hand cannons, oh, now the meta's going to be like, I don't know, shotguns. And the thing is, like, you kind of try to play the game, but then everything you've just collected, like, that isn't a shotgun or isn't a pulse or whatever, becomes useless for that entire season or that entire year, depending on when the metas shift, which then makes trying to play the game and trying to sort of enjoy it difficult, because you're constantly having to chop and change. You can't sort of make a build, stick with that build, enjoy that build, because literally a few months later everything that was in that build is now broken or nerfed into hell or whatever, and that's kind of one of the reasons a lot of people is like will join Destiny, start trying to play it and then just leave, because they're effectively fed up with like not having any kind of control over what they do, which I think, to be fair, I think Destiny have kind of stealthily replaced management by promoting them out, if you will, to get some fresh blood in there to actually maybe rectify this situation. Certainly the last season and the current season have shown that they're kind of moving away from this kind of bizarre shift the meta every kind of time and destroy people's loot, and then try to get them to grind for the same exact thing again and again kind of meta. That seems to be slowly moving out, which hopefully they have done, but you never know with Destiny. Too many cooks and all that kind of nonsense. But back to Outriders, the loot in Outriders, which is what got me on the rant for Destiny, is just nice. You get the loot, you can clearly see builds that you're going to be able to make, and because there's no PvP element to like ruin the loot, or there's no reason for them, because it's effectively a single player game, there's no reason for them to kind of nerf things into the ground. They're going to allow you to basically enjoy the loot that you've got, and allow you to do like crazy diverse things. In fact, rushing into enemies, doing crazy diverse things is what makes the actual game fun. Once you've found a decent piece of loot, you can kind of literally go in there and guns blazing, turn people inside out, that kind of thing. So they've kind of concentrated on that, which is good, because as I say, the story and also the kind of main gameplay for two of the classes that you can use is kind of like oddly broken already, simply because those classes just aren't geared towards the way the game forces you to play, which is in your face of the enemies. In fact, cover, which is ironic, seems to be more used to the enemies than it is to you, and it's more frustrating when they take cover, because then you have to kind of flush them out of it, or you have to literally leap over the cover into their faces and smack them, kind of thing. Whereas when you take cover, literally, if there are 5 enemies on screen, you'll get 5 grenades suddenly landing cover where you were, as they try to blow you out of cover. It's that kind of odd kind of mechanic. And when you've got a class like the Pyromancer or the Geomancer, who literally can't stay outside of cover because they're just too squishy, you know, as you can see, that kind of just, it's contradictory, basically. It doesn't make much sense. And I think a lot of people who have found they don't like the game, or don't like the demo, have literally had the issue where they've tried to play a cover-based shooter because they think that's what it is, and found that they can't use cover because the enemies will just rush you and grenade you and shotgun you from behind and all these kinds of things, meaning that you just can't use the cover. So they're kind of saying to themselves, well, how can it be a cover-based shooter if every time I use cover I get slaughtered? And then they're probably playing as Pyromancers or like Geomancers, where you're throwing out a turret. You know, literally you're in cover throwing out a turret, and the turret's supposed to be doing the work. If you're in cover, you throw out a turret, and the enemy ignore the turret and come around cover and shoot you, then clearly your experience is going to be what the F, you know what I mean? It's kind of silly. So I think they kind of need to address that in the long run, simply because otherwise two classes, just the way you'd expect to play them, the way any normal person would expect to play them, simply become unplayable based on the way the enemy AI reacts. So that aside though, the loot's good, the graphics, they're passable. I mean, you kind of, I guess Gears of War, if you're playing on Series X like I am, kind of spoils you, because Gears of War as a cover shooter, the graphics are gorgeous, it sticks to 60 frames per second, it's got tons of enemies on screen, and then you've got Outriders, which doesn't look as pretty. It kind of targets 60. I won't say it sticks to 60. I've got a variable rate screen, so it'll basically effectively it'll adjust its refresh rate based on what the game's throwing out, and if I put up the debug menu on that, I can clearly see it skipping anywhere between like 53 and 60 frames per second depending on what's happening on screen. So if you're not lucky enough to have like a variable refresh screen, I can see how this might become a bit janky for you. So hopefully that's an optimization that they can do in a patch, because I don't see why not. As I've said, Gears 5 runs at 4K 60 literally without a blip, so it's more than possible, especially as Gears is actually oddly enough a busier game than Outriders when it comes to combat. There's more happening in Gears than there is in like Outriders. Outriders combat is kind of okay, as I said. If you're with the Trickster or you're with like the Geomancer, it's nice. The combat in your face kind of works, but if you're with the other two classes, it doesn't. So that's kind of my first impressions. I'd say as a looter shooter, the looting potential in this game is excellent. Gameplay, they're going to need to tweak it definitely for at least two of the classes, because the way you'd expect to play them and the way you have to play them doesn't work. And then for the other two, it works fine. So they need to do something there, whether it's adjust the AI if you're playing on that class, or just do something to make those classes more survivable. I don't know what they're going to do there, but they need to do something, I guess. And the story wise, it started off terribly, but a lot of looter shooters do. I mean, look at Diablo for instance. Diablo 3 story, you were just like, yeah, really? You played it because the Diablo 3 loop is excellent, the looting in it is excellent, the building in it is excellent, so you kind of just weathered through and didn't really care too much about the story. There's some big baddies popping up, kill them, enjoy the fun, that kind of thing. Outriders is more that kind of gearing. A 35-hour campaign, I guess there might be some revelations in the story. I guess the main full game may have some interesting stuff in it, but if you're buying this for story, I'd kind of maybe hold off, just to see whether or not the story is actually, well, any good, because from the start and from the demo it basically isn't. A lot of the stuff doesn't make sense. Why your character, basically your character thinks they're dying at the beginning, and when they get frozen, why do they think they're dying? Because they're not even injured after the explosion, literally. It's one of those weird things where you're just like, okay, really? And then when your character is unfrozen, later on in the first chapter, you literally, the only thing you suffer from is a slight cough from coming out of cryo. Adjust into cryo and then you're fine. At no point, even though for you it's been like 2 minutes, do you think, oh, shouldn't I be dying? So it's just, it's kind of bizarrely weird. So there you go. Those are my first impressions. Definitely play it, and if you're like me and you've got into basically play as the trickster, I'd highly recommend you play as the trickster for the demo, certainly, just to enjoy the demo and really get the most out of it. And if you play as the trickster, you'll also find yourself literally farming a demo for legendaries. The most bizarre thing ever. It's now become a thing on the web as well, where you just keep going back and farming simply because you want to get better weaponry and stuff, and because apparently your progress in the demo will carry straight over to the main game, so you won't have to do all the first stuff again. I'll be honest with you, I don't believe that's going to be true. I believe they'll probably take your character over. I think they're going to do something about the gear though, because it would be odd to me if they let you farm the demo for legendaries and then let you keep them. Maybe they will, but the problem is, if I read the description correctly of what the developer said, you can upgrade any gear you have. So if you find like really good legendaries now, you can literally upgrade them to right to end game and beyond. And if that is the case, then farming the demo for the next month or so to get every single legendary, yeah, that would kind of make the main game a bit odd. So yeah, I suspect that they might do something about that. I don't know what, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they might just switch off the ability to get legendaries in it at some point. Anyway, I shall leave it at that. Hopefully this has been an interesting kind of take on it. I did say I would do a short video. This has gone up to about 20 minutes or so. So not quite as short as I wanted it to be, but long and short of it, definitely play the demo, play as a trickster or geomancer. Don't waste your time with a pyromancer yet. Hopefully they'll kind of get a fix on that. And the technomancer, it's a novelty, but ultimately you're going to be frustrated every time you try to take cover and get blown out of cover and then just die while your turret is sitting there. It's going to annoy you. I guarantee it will annoy you. So have fun, all my tricksters out there, because that's what you're going to end up being, and try the demo for yourselves. But yes, overall my verdict would be, yeah, it's pretty good. It's definitely great for loot, definitely better than a lot of the stuff out there now, including Destiny 2 when it comes to loot anyway. So not when it comes to gun gameplay. Destiny still has it beat with gun gameplay, so I'll put that out there right now, just in case everyone who likes Destiny is going to start screaming at me. Yes, Destiny has better gunplay, but I'm sorry, I have to be honest, Outriders, even from just a demo, has better loot. It's that simple. So there we go. Have a good time. If you like this, kind of subscribe, or put a thumbs up. If you didn't, put a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments, and I can change whatever, or try to anyway. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day. Stay safe. Peace.